Hey, Montel Williams here. Look, I've got some incredible news to share with you. I want to tell you about my brand new book that's coming out that's called The Sailing of the Intrepid. Now, this book is more than just an historical account. It's a tribute to the brave men who served aboard the USS Intrepid and a celebration of their extraordinary legacy. Writing this book was such an incredible story, and I'm really thrilled to be able to share it with you. So don't wait to grab your little piece of history. The book is available right now to order. You can go to montelmedia.com, and you can even get a limited autograph signed copy. Now, thank you so much for your support. I can't wait for you to read this incredible story of the sailing of the Intrepid. I'll see you on the pages. Well, hey guys, welcome back to Free Thinking with Montel. I'm your host, Montel Williams, and today we're diving into a topic that's not just timely, it's essential. We're talking about how everyday citizens can reclaim their power, make a difference, and heal our democracy in the process. Our guest today is the author of the newly revised, updated Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. He's the founder of Results, an anti-poverty advocacy organization, co-founder of the Microcredit Summit Campaign, and founder of the Civic Courage. Sam Daley-Harris, welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
It's great to be with you.
So good to have you here. I want to start with something that you often talk about in your speeches and your story of self. You call it knowing your why and sharing it.
Yes.
Why is it so important? Can you share with us share your why with us?
Absolutely. And I always like to tell people this was developed by Harvard professor Marshall Gans, and it basically asks what happened in your life and what decisions did you make to get you to this commitment. And so I urge people who are watching or listening to think about their story of self. What happened in your life and what decisions did you make? Here's mine. It's a little wacky, but here it is. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music. And 45 years ago, I founded the anti-poverty lobby Results. And a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? But when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation in 1964, and the assassination of U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, it's now 1977, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I'm thinking it's inevitable because there must be no solutions. Again, what do I know? Because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this event and it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature, people. We'll just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978, 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote them. I don't want to know if you met them, just the name. Out of 7,000 students asked, 200, fewer than 3%, could answer correctly. 6,800, over 97%, could not tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. So I urge people to think about what happened in your life and what decisions did you make because knowing your why and sharing it really makes a difference.
Absolutely. Well, your book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, was first published 30 years ago. Why did you feel it was so important to update it and release it again now?
I want to tell a story that portrays why it's so important to re-release it. A year ago, I was on this national radio show, hundreds, like 350 stations, and question number two in this interview, the interviewer said, I was really moved by how vulnerable he was. He said, the passive nature to our politics now, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career and I feel beat down by it, he said. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What's the way out of that? End of quote. I mean, I was really moved by how vulnerable he was, but the agony in his question was why I re-released the book. The first thing I said was, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're the crew. Well, are we? And if we are, how does crew operate? And the second thing I said was, futurist and climate activist Alex Steffen said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? So it was really the agony in that question number two on that national radio interview that really is an expression of why I felt this book on transformational advocacy was so needed, and I updated it to get it out there.
Well, in some ways, I get what's driving you. The idea that we can have impact on, the trajectory of our democracy. We think we can, but the truth
Mm-hmm.
of the matter is that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when you released the book the first time, we may have had an opportunity to have some sort of impact. I'm going to throw out a premise to you right now to say that I don't believe individual citizens have any impact on the trajectory of our democracy from this point forth. We're living in a
Well,
time right now. We're living at a time right now, and I
yeah,
want you to argue me and tell me why I'm wrong when I say what
yeah,
I'm about to say. We are living
yeah.
at a time right now when the person in the White House is a convicted felon, a noted liar, a noted sexual predator, best friends with a sexual predator for over 10 years who was abusing children, who's trying to protect their partner in crime, who is a convicted molester himself and a convicted perjurer. And we have we have literally a quarter of the nation's population who doesn't give a damn, who doesn't care, who is backing up this deviant personality. And because if we dig in deeper, we recognize that some of those who are backing up that deviant person probably have some deviance going on in their own lives. I just wonder how impactful our individual, not contributions, but our individual efforts are in preserving
Yep,
something that seems like it's
yep,
going out the door.
yep, yep. Okay, there's so many different ways I could answer it. If I could just start with making it clear what transformational advocacy is and then get to your
Sure.
question. So we all know transactional advocacy, sign the petition, transaction complete. But with transformational advocacy, you're trained, encouraged, and succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do, like we were talking about this, meet with a member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do that, you see yourself differently. That's the transformation. So what we're talking about is this relational kind of advocacy. Now your charge is, yeah, but how's it ever going to work in 2025 kind of thing? So let me tell you a quick story. Nine ways I could answer, but I'll do it this way. the anti-poverty lobby I founded, Results, has lobbied on global health and child survival for 41 years. And the global child death rate has fallen 66% over those 41 years, from 40,000 a day in the early 80s a day to 13,125 a day in 2025. And now Mr. Musk and Marco Rubio and Donald Trump come along, and they really do a demolition derby on these global health measures. And we could see the global child death tick up again after decades of falling down. Now, here's the answer to your question. In July of 2025, the House Appropriations Committee, House, not the Democrats, the House Appropriations Committee basically rejected President Trump's calls for deep cuts to global health next year in 2026. I'll give you one example. The funding for maternal and child health this year was $915 million, and President Trump called for a cut to $85 million. But the House Appropriations Committee, in its bill, appropriated $915 million. There's a glimmer of hope there. And, part of it is that 128 members of the House signed a letter led by 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats urging the committee to fully fund or robustly fund maternal and child health and other programs. So, yeah, there's great reason to be discouraged, but it's kind of like, let me say it in one other way. I came to know this author from Stanford University, Jamil Zaki. He wrote this book. I love the title, Hope for Cynics: The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. And he says in the book, if you're a cynic, it's like you're playing poker and you fold your hand before the game even starts. And I say, if you're a civic cynic, you fold your hand before the Congress is even sworn in, before the first bill is even introduced. So yeah, you want reasons to be discouraged and knock your head against the wall? Yeah. But the folks I know engage. I can keep going, and I'm going to stop. And they won't take the horrifying situation as the end result. They keep going.
I do hear you, but I'm telling you, every single day you wake up, and as a cynic, you can see something else ridiculous that this current administration and this current Congress and Senate do, that literally, though, you gave an example of something that makes you think that we've taken a step forward, but today they've done some things that I know that we have taken steps backwards. We're going to take a look at over the next, year and a half before the next cycle of elections, the gerrymandering that's going to go on across the country to ensure that, hate is the message of the day rather than any kind
Yeah.
of unity being the message of the day. And I just don't understand how, the non cynics or the cynics can think that there's anything that can be accomplished in this country whose democracy is so fledgling that by the time we wake up, we will have taken so many steps backwards that, one or two victories of a couple $1 billion isn't going to make a difference.
Yep. Okay, great. So let me give you a whack at it. A week ago, I was on the phone with a fella, volunteer, who lives in Utah. He's with the group Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL, and he was telling me that in September is their annual walk with their U.S. senator. And I'll give you a little backstory. It's the one who took Mitt Romney's seat. It's John Curtis, Republican of Utah. He said the walk is going to be a 3-hour walk with about 30 volunteers with their senator. Now, that doesn't make sense, actually, but that's what's happened. And it was when he was elected to the House, John Curtis, in 2017, he announced a town hall hike, and 8 people showed up, 6 of them from Citizens Climate Lobby. That one was an 8-hour hike with their newly minted congressperson. And then a year later, he promised an annual walk with the Citizen Climate Lobby volunteers. he was on one of their monthly webinars this year, and he said, on the first hike, someone asked me what I'm doing about carbon. And I had never thought about carbon, you know. And a few years later, this congressman, now senator, started the Conservative Climate Caucus. And at the end of last Congress, there were 87 Republicans on the Conservative Climate Caucus. In October is his Conservative Climate Summit in Utah, kind of thing. So, yeah, I know there's this avalanche of horrible news. And I keep my eye on the people who are in gear and taking action. Even even when things look horrid.
Well, I mean, and again, I understand that too, and I, would be the first to try my best to point to any example of something that looks like we're rallying towards a positive rather than a negative. But unfortunately, as you watch the news every single day, and that's one of the things that I wish I wasn't one of those people who did so, because it is depressing every single day, especially when you see
Yep.
things like when we see 30-year senators, 20-year congressmen trying to literally justify in front of a camera why they support a rapist as a president. And
Yeah.
when we see the fact that a rapist, child molester who was convicted, was getting ready to be convicted, was in prison, why his accomplice could be just with a stroke of a pen moved from one prison to another. One of the most vile human beings that we've known of. I can't imagine if we had had this conversation 20 years ago, nobody would be even thinking that you would put a child molester, perjurer in a minimum security prison and get away with it. But nobody's complaining about it. It's been done. Fait accompli. It's not like something that we might do. Fait accompli. Ghislaine Maxwell is sitting in a minimum security prison today. A rapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
A known child
So my
rapist.
question, yes. So what are we going to do?
What are we going to do?
And
sit back and let the news cycle change the way it has. Because look at the news today and ain't nobody talking about it. Barely talking about it. Barely considering holding anybody responsible for this. And a week from now, it's going to be old news. Then they'll put her in, a halfway house. Then they'll figure out when the president goes ahead and pardons them and nobody's going to give a damn. One predator pardoning another predator. And won't be held responsible for it. If that fool decides to run, I mean, one of the things that blows my mind the most is that the script was written, played, broadcast worldwide almost 10 years ago when he stood in front of a podium and said, I could literally shoot somebody in the middle of Times Square and nobody's going to do a damn thing about it. And nobody's doing a damn thing about it. What do you say to people who say that, when you say, defend our democracy, when they say back to you, what good does it do to defend a democracy that doesn't really even exist anymore?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I keep looking for some light at the end of the tunnel here. And I'm going to give you one other example. And I want to tell you what I urge people to look for if they're looking for a group that will deliver transformational advocacy. But I was talking about the global health thing. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria and its partners have saved 65 million lives since 2002. Where do you read in the paper about 65 million lives saved kind of thing? And so it was funded this year at 1.65 billion, and President Trump for next year asked for 800 million. Well, the House Appropriations Committee agreed to 1.5 billion. And so there were 160 members of the House who signed a letter to the top appropriators urging them to robustly fund the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and PEPFAR. And so, there are people who are in there fighting the good fight. And so let me just tell you what I tell folks when they're looking for a group that will feed them power. Three things. First is recruitment and community building. The group brings new people in, not to build an e-blast list, but to form them into local chapters so you're not working alone. Recruitment. The community building is they would have a monthly whole of organization webinar with guest speakers, Q&A, inspiration. Recruitment and community building. Two, training. The group offers training like, how do you get the meeting with the elected? How do you plan for the meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? Two, training. Three, the group encourages breakthroughs. In Reclaiming Our Democracy, there's a small drawing with a circle labeled your comfort zone, and next to it is a massive drawing labeled where the magic happens. And you're looking for an organization that doesn't kick you out of your comfort zone, but encourages you out of your comfort zone so you can have this experience of transformational advocacy. If I could
Sure, of
tell
course.
one other story, I was talking to the head of organizing for an organization everybody listening to this podcast would know their name. And the head of organizing said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Protecting their brand was more important than empowering their members. The group I mentioned, Citizens Climate Lobby, I coached them their first 7 years. The year before COVID, their volunteers had 4,300 letters, op-eds, and editorials published. One group saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. CCL saying, what do we have to do to help them get it right? And give that to them. And as a result, they had 4,300 letters, op-eds, and editorials the year before COVID. And I say the year before COVID because it's all about people getting together, not bowling alone. And when COVID hit, while they may have had a monthly webinar with 20 in the room or 40 in the room or 50 in the room, once COVID hit, it was like one by one by one by one by one. And so they're now having to rebuild back to the getting together piece, which is how they operate, the relational piece, which is the piece of working with members of Congress in a relational way, not in a send me a e-blast way.
I mean, you coach volunteers and meet with elected officials all over the place, and even those who oppose their bills. You have them ask three specific questions
Yeah.
in those meetings.
Yeah.
What are those questions, and why are they so important?
Yeah. So if I'm coaching a group and they're meeting with their member of Congress and they know up front they oppose the bill, whatever the bill is, I have them ask these three questions. One, we know you don't support this bill. What would it take to change your mind? You're listening for assignments from the congressperson. What would it take to change your mind? Two, could you say more about that? Three, why do you think that is? It's basically a deep listening exercise, and B, a step to building a relationship with this elected official. And I want to tell this story. I know this guy who was going from Philadelphia area down to South Florida. This is starting in 2013. He wanted to start a climate solutions caucus in Congress with a lead Republican and a lead Democrat. And he went down to South Florida because there were Republicans and Democrats in Congress and there was sea level rise. And he meets with the member of Congress and he says, what would it take to change your mind? The member of Congress said, well, if you could get the chambers of commerce on board. And he did. Miami Beach, Coral Gables, North Miami, came back with letters from the heads of the chambers, comes back and the congressman says, well, if you could get the mayors on board. And he did, letters from Miami Beach, North Miami, etc. And so, if you're in this to make a difference, you're listening for assignments and you're asking questions of, what would it take to change your mind?
And what's the most surprising transformation that you've witnessed in someone who started out, hesitant about being advocate and
Yeah. Well,
advocacy?
so let me, I can tell bunches of stories. Let me just tell this one for starters. It's about an amazing woman. I always say this, but we're all amazing if we get the right training. Her name is Maxine Thomas. She's in the book, Reclaiming Our Democracy. And Maxine, she has a lived experience of poverty. And she told me, uh, I had a heart for service, but I was clueless about advocacy, especially political advocacy. It's a longer story, but eventually she finds results, the anti poverty lobby. She gets a scholarship to go to the conference in DC. And the night before her first ever meeting with her members of Congress, she learns at the end of earned income tax credit is about to expire. The bottom line is she has this full day of meetings, first ever, with her senators and her representatives. And she, at the end of the day, she says, I was euphoric. I was on this high and felt I was part of something revolutionary. The first part, she said, I was clueless. By the end of the day, she said, I was euphoric. That is transformational advocacy. And it's because she had a group together. She got training. She was encouraged to move out of her comfort zone and to have a breakthrough. And that's where she could get to. I was euphoric.
Now, in your book, you talk about the power of meeting with those elected officials. I mean, what advice would you give someone who feels intimidated by the idea of sitting down with a member of Congress? I've done it multiple times, and I've done it multiple times, and almost always to no avail. But talk to me about why you think it's important for people to think that that idea even works these days. Because I will
Well,
tell you, I don't feel like that congressman, they allow people to walk through for photo ops, but could give a damn on what the
yeah,
person does when they walk out the door.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's true for some, but it's not true for all of them, kind of thing. And so I just want to say a couple of things. When Donald Trump was elected in 2016, 100 million Americans didn't vote. I mean, it's like we're having this national slumber party or something. In 2020, when Joe Biden was elected, it was the largest percentage turnout in 125 years, and 80 million didn't vote. In the most recent election, it was 90 million who didn't vote. So, we have a significant group on the sidelines. And that's why I urge people to get in there. And I'm going to tell another story about a woman. She was a volunteer when she told me this story. She's now on staff. Her name is Ellie Sparks. And she said, before I joined Citizens Climate Lobby, I was suffering from climate trauma. I would read Bill McKibben's book, Earth, and I would weep at home and I would weep at work. She said, then I joined CCL, and 18 months later, I was co-leading a workshop on building relationships with members of Congress and editorial writers. And I want to tell you the last bit about what she said. At the end of their conference that year, she had meetings with 20 congressional offices over 4 days. And this is what she said. She said, going into their offices was hard. I had to let go of a lot of emotional baggage. I could no longer judge them or hold hostility in my heart toward them. I had to let go of my fear of climate change and my fear that they wouldn't listen to me. I had to center myself in love. Releasing fear and centering in love, this is sacred and profound work. End of quote. So she started at climate trauma and ended up at sacred and profound. You know, action is part of the antidote to hopelessness. And that's what these groups are. I'll say one last thing. Recently, Citizens Climate Lobby had their annual conference in Washington, D.C. They had 404 meetings with congressional offices. There are only 435, and they met with 404 of them. And so, they're going to keep plugging at it no matter what.
Look, you've been an advocate and been involved in advocacy for over 4 decades now. How has this landscape of citizen engagement and activism really changed since the time that you started.
Yeah. Well, it's changed dramatically. I mean, when we started lobbying, there was no internet and there were no podcasts or Substacks or blogs or that there was no Twitter or Facebook or no avalanche of media back then. But what hasn't changed is the importance of relationships. You could say it's more difficult now. When we started in 1980, a member of Congress had 250,000 fewer constituents, meaning the congressional district population has grown a lot. So it's changed in dramatic ways, except for one. Relationships not only matter now, they matter more than ever. And that's why these groups that work to deliver transformational advocacy are the groups that focus on building relationships.
Do you see or get a sense of more frustration among those people out there, that potential group of people who could have been advocates, who now are just so frustrated, who have said, forget it, because there's really nothing I can do and I have no impact on anything?
Well, you see both. You see people going out to the protests and kind of coming out of their house and off the couch. You see that. And then you see others who are, I can't take it. I'm out of here. No way, Jose, kind of thing. So you see people coming in and people going out, and both things are happening. My main message is that agonizing and signing petitions and protesting, as important as that is, aren't the only options, and that this transformational advocacy is a key missing piece that most people have never heard of or even imagined was possible.
And you've worked on issues ranging from poverty to climate change. How do you decide which causes you focus on? And what advice would you give to someone trying to find their own advocacy niche?
Okay, well, let me say a couple of things. I think in the program notes, there's going to be a sign up sheet. And on the sign up sheet, you can let me know if you'd like some help in being connected to one of these groups I've mentioned and a few others I've not yet mentioned. But my main message is focus. Don't work on this and this and this and this and that. No, focus and go deep on something that you care about, and trust that others are going deep on the other issues. Because when you focus, you can actually become a mini spokesperson, really, in your community and with your elected officials and with the media in your community. And so I think focusing is really, really important. And again, on the Reclaiming Our Democracy website, the sign up sheet lives there too, and you can find it there.
And of course, where would they go to do that? Just go ahead and give out your stats real quick while we're talking about it.
Well, it's reclaimingourdemocracy.com. And on that website is a learn more. And the learn more button is on the homepage, is basically the sign up sheet where you can let me know, I was inspired by what you said, but I don't know how to get started. I don't know how to find one of these groups. Or you can let me know if there's a speaking possibility, your place of worship, a book group, a class you're in or that you teach, and some other ways that we might connect.
What's your vision for the future of democracy? I mean, how do you see transformational advocacy playing a role in shaping the future of this country?
Yeah. Well, my vision for the future of democracy is that we engage. I mean, in the last 18 months, I've done 111 in-person and Zoom talks, not counting podcasts and other media, just talks to groups. So all I can do is keep putting it out there and bringing more people in and off the sidelines so they can find their own role and their own place in it all.
As we head towards the midterms, I mean, do you think we're going to have the same number of people sit on the sidelines as we have for the last elections?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really funny because, when you hear one side or the other speak, you have the one side saying, well, the president clearly has a mandate. No, he doesn't. The president really only has a reflection of, that third of our society that walked to the polls. And out of that third of our society that walked to the polls, half of them didn't vote for him. You know what I mean? So let's clearly understand the numbers here. It's so weird because, somebody will throw out, well, we have 346 million people in America. And out of that, 240 million of them are voting age. And, Clearly the president received more than half. No, he didn't. Because if you got out of 240 million that was a voting age, only 90 million of them didn't show up. So that means now you got 150 million left. And out of 150 million left, he only got half of that, or a little bit above half of that, which was about 79 million votes. And that 79 million votes is not half of America. That's only half of the people who didn't sit out. And, I often try to say that to people because they go, no, no, half of America voted. No, half of America did not vote. So now we're getting ready to go into midterms, and we're going to a midterm that's going to be, characterized by states that went out and gerrymandered to see if they could get another 10, 20, 30, 40 seats. Because, really the minority is trying to drive what the majority does. When we hear terms minority, we think that represents, people of color and people who are poor. No, it doesn't. It represents those people who are claiming to have, this kind of mandate from the American public.
Yeah.
How do we convince more people to go out there and vote?
All you can do is say, look what's going on in your life. Is this what you want? Is this what you want your country to be? Are these the actions that you really are up for? And sadly, fewer people vote in midterms than vote in the federal elections. So hopefully, we'll put it out there. Hopefully there'll be people who watch and listen to this and kind of want to give it another shot and find a way to get back in and be part of the action, that rather than part of the peanut gallery, just watching from the sidelines.
And it's shocking though to me with the issues that we are facing today, that there is a peanut gallery that's just watching, that don't understand that every single move that's happening right now is going to impact either them or their family in the future, within the next 2 to 3 years. This isn't going to be 30 years from now. This is going to be the next 2 to 3 years. Yet they still choose to sit on the sidelines. Are you discouraged or are you encouraged?
No, I'm nothing but encouraged, and not by what others do, but what I can do. And I hope others feel the same way. If I could share the longer version of that quote I shared a snippet of earlier from Alex Steffen, the futurist, he said, optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who believe nothing will get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insist we can solve those problems. And I love how, optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo love you sitting on the sidelines, basically. Yeah.
Are you optimistic about this next generation? I've seen some things recently, where it seems as if finally those who are on, there's different sides of this coin, but those who are not conservative and those who are, I don't know what they want to call themselves, who are looking for more of an inclusive society, some of those have now finally stepped up to the plate and said, we're not going to take it anymore. And we're going to start the whole rallies right alongside with those who are trying to slip us back. It's so funny how one side talks about make America great again, but they keep referring to times when there were things that happened in America that didn't make America great. It's like we look at what's going on when it comes to, sexual predators. We got a president who's just put this predator into a low security lockup thing, as if it didn't matter what they did. So those who were victims of these things feel as if our government has turned their back on them. And, what a sad commentary for, all the strides that women made, in voting and other things for 20, 30 years, and trying to, even the Me Too movement, which some people, poo-poo and say was a waste of time. There were movements that literally helped to move us forward a couple of steps. But now all of a sudden we want to move them back. We want to be able to go back to a time when it was easy to rape a child and there would be no repercussions. We want to go back to a time when it was easy to kill another person with no repercussions. We have people who are in official positions doing as much damage as they could do to people. I'm talking about ICE and other organizations that are out here claiming to try and be protecting our democracy, but are really doing nothing more than the bidding of the racist who, asked them to go out and kick people out. And I saw something the other day that was really profound. It's like, we have so many farms across America that are closing down the doors now because they don't have any employees to actually go out and pick their fruits and vegetables. But they would love to be able to try to force people who would never have done those jobs before to do them again in this new found, sense of indentured servitude or slavery, where, we're not going to let you have any, you won't have health care, you won't have any things that benefits that our society could give you unless you go back to work and work as a slave on somebody's property. And when the president says, I'm going to allow certain people to come in the country as long as, their masters take responsibility for them, there's something weird there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why Reclaiming Our Democracy, the book, talks about transformational advocacy, the methodology that isn't to sign the petition, all done, take a nap, but it's the people that are engaging week in and week out and more deeply to make a difference on things they care about. And I think that's everyone. I mean, it might be buried a little deeper for some people than others, but I think we all want to leave the campsite cleaner than we found it. We just need to find a vehicle that feeds us power, that can really help us make a difference. I say transformational advocacy is not the only solution needed, but it's one essential missing piece: citizens awakening to their power. And, not enough of us are awake to our power.
Well, I think that right there is a statement in itself. We need to have our citizenry wake up to their power and understand that they do have power, not be as jaded as I can be from time to time, thinking that our power doesn't matter. Because I question whether or not, we have enough people out there who really give a damn. We act like we do, we claim we do, but at the end of the day, we don't step up to the plate to do anything about it. Yeah. This has been such an enlightening conversation, Sam. What do you want people to take away from, your book and from the messages that you've shared today?
Well, essentially, we can make a difference. You can make a difference. That's one. Number two, connect with me in the program notes, the sign-up sheet, or at reclaimingourdemocracy.com, and get my help to connect you with one of these groups that works to deliver transformational advocacy. And let's make a difference.
Sam, you're so right. I hope there are more of us who understand and go out and get a copy of Reclaim Our Democracy and understand it's not just about reclaiming it, but it's about preserving what we have. If we don't do anything about it at all, this won't be there. And it's not a matter of 20, 30 years from now. We're talking about in the next 2 years. I mean, if this particular person who's apt to be in office right now decides that I'm going to just say, screw our Constitution and I'm going to run again, our democracy is done. And especially if the pushback isn't as vehement among all our citizenry. I'm not just talking about the portion that voted in, but all of them should want to say, even those who voted for him before should say, no, enough is enough. It's time for the generations who are alive today to lead themselves, not the generations of yesterday to lead the ones that won't be around when future debacles happen. So I got to say thank you so much, sir, for being a part of the show today. Thank you for sticking around. I know we had some technical difficulties that, our viewers aren't going to understand, but you stuck through them, and I want to thank you so much for that. And also want to thank you for tuning in to Free Thinking with Montel. We'll see you on the next time. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear feedback, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.